65 years ago, audiences were dazzled at the first sight of Gone with the Wind in glorious Technicolor. But while this extraordinary movie was spectacular in many ways, it never looked and sounded as good as it does now. Join us as we go inside Warner's state-of-the-art restoration facility to see firsthand how an innovative studio goes about restoring a legend.
It was the first true full-color motion picture image that anyone had ever seen before. These images look spectacular. What's been sitting on these negatives all these years is just remarkable. When you look at our restored films of Adventures of Robin Hood, Gone with the Wind, Singin' in the Rain, or Meet Me in St. Louis, all of these films today, when they're re-registered and realigned, they look far superior than any color motion picture shot in the first 10 or 15 years of color photography. I mean on through into the 1960s. This company, Technicolor, developed this camera, and it actually ran 3 strips of black and white film in perfect registration simultaneously through the camera. One scene entered the lens of the camera, then got split through a prism, and that image then was recorded on these 3 individual strips of film. So each one of the black and white strips of film, while it was a gray and black and white image, it was a record of the red, green, and blue information. Sounds a little complicated, but what was great was Technicolor was able to interpret that information and then in turn transfer that into what was called a dye transfer printing process, and they could create the full color image on the screen.
Technicolor had an incredible color library and researched colors and dyes, and they had probably the best knowledge of color in all its aspects of anyone at the time, and they came up with some very permanent dyes.
So when you can find a Technicolor print from the era, from 1938, 1939, 1940, if you can find that print today, it may have scratches and damage to it from running through projectors, but the colors will be true.
People will be happy for the rest of time that Gone with the Wind was recorded on a Technicolor camera.
Older film in general, but Technicolor film specifically has some characteristic kinds of problems.
As moisture extrudes out of the film over time, it causes the frames to distort and change shape, so you literally will have, if you hold up a frame, instead of being a square, it's now kind of a trapezoid, and it's a warp.
Luckily, our technology was able to compensate for that shrinkage. Otherwise, you would have seen areas like there's a shuttered sequence where Mellie is giving birth, and those shutters just went wild because of the shrinkage of the film. And these are normal things. Film is an organic substance. It's going to shrink, it's going to warp, it's going to deteriorate, it's going to mold, and luckily we can apply new technologies so that we can fight the ravages of time.
Elements were not always well taken care of or well tracked throughout the decades. A wide range of bad ideas got in the way of hanging on to original things. Unfortunately,
this film was reissued on a number of occasions, and each time everybody attempted to modernize it a little bit.
When people were working on these films, especially Gone with the Wind and other titles as well, in the 1960s for re-releases, it never occurred to them that the actions they were taking, like reformatting compositions of dissolves and then tossing away the original elements of the process, it never occurred to them that they were damaging them from future generations of ever appreciating them again.
Our primary audio source for the finished mono mix happened to be an element that some very bright executive decades ago instructed the MGM vault to dispose of. A gentleman who we've worked with for years was a music editor for MGM at the time, and he was working in the vault, and this shouldn't be thrown away. This is way too valuable. So instead of arguing with them to keep it, he simply hid it. He disguised it and stuck it away in a corner somewhere, and kind of made sure he knew where it was and followed it around off the radar for decades. And this became our primary source.
People today are much more sensitive to being faithful to the original motion picture than people have been in the past. I mean, there just was not that much respect or concern, nor did people think that these elements, with each succeeding year, to think that these films necessarily had a life in the future. The problem was Warner Bros. Has this huge library of 3-strip color motion pictures dating all from the 30s through the 1950s. So that it was felt that if we just re-release these films in the best photochemical restorations available, audiences wouldn't find that attractive. So a gentleman at Warner Brothers came up with an idea, Chris Cookson, of using the process called edge detection. How about if we scanned these 3 Technicolor negatives, and through using edge detection, came up with how to realign the 3 records to a level of perfection never realized before.
What happened was we were in this theater when it was brand new, and we were projecting the high-definition version of it electronically on the screen.
And he walked up to the screen, and with a digital projector, he could actually count that there was a 5-pixel error, as they held a still frame, a 5-pixel error of the red record on I think it was a horse or some object in the frame.
So the realization was that if we could just get these things to align, we'd find detail and information that's always been there but never visible.
The task of writing the software was assigned to Paul Klamer of Warner Brothers, and Paul ended up working closely with Sharon and Karen Perlmutter of America Online, and they ended up writing the truly complex parts of the code. How the software works is we take the 3 Technicolor original camera negatives and we scan them on a 4K digital scanner, and then the software, we join those 3 records together, and that's when it goes through the process of actually detecting the red, green, and blue separations and how to realign them again. It's a remarkable software because it does this automatically. It literally takes each individual frame and it starts at the center of the image, working its way outward until it gets to the outward edges of the frame and gets everything in perfect alignment again. Now, not only is it aligned at least as good as the film when it was originally released, we believe actually we've achieved a level of alignment and registration that probably has never been seen before.
The result is actually beyond what we had hoped to see. We saw a degree of detail that we didn't even know to expect.
A great example of the details that are revealed is that great opening shot of Scarlett O'Hara when she's first revealed in the picture.
War, war, war. This war talk's spoiling all the fun at every party this spring. I get so bored I could scream.
You look at the lace detail on her dress. In previous film prints, you could see a texture of detail. But now, with this restoration, the clarity of the image, you can see that it is actually a precise lace pattern, and you can make out all of the threads in the lace. It's really spectacular to see these things that we're uncovering.
And there's a scene where Scarlett has a green velvet shawl and waistband.
Oh, you look good enough to eat.
In the previous versions, it was green and it was cloth, and that was it. But in the new version, you look at it, and it is so clearly velvet, you can reach out and touch it. It just captures the sheen and the surface that was there the day they shot it.
If anybody out there has seen the DVD of Singing in the Rain or The Adventures of Robin Hood, there's undoubtedly a clarity in this new process.
The most important thing when we're working with these films is trying to find the most comprehensive inventory of the feature worldwide.
There's a lot of material out there. So the first thing we do is we gather up everything we can find to evaluate it firsthand, to look at it and see what we've got. Look at it, check out its physical condition, and then listen to it and see what it sounds like.
And God is my witness. I'll never be hungry again.
These restorations are quite difficult, but some are easier than others depending upon how the materials were stored and how they were processed originally. It's quite oftentimes that we'll mix and match elements to make a successful completed restoration, and the key is making sure they match seamlessly and trying every trick in the book. And now we have a whole new bag of electronic tools to apply to this.